Hey everyone, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my writing tip video series. In the month of July, I'm going to be talking about publishing, and today I'm talking about self-publishing versus traditional publishing. So I'm going to go through 7 different categories and tell you the pros and cons of self-publishing versus traditional publishing. The first thing is distribution. Obviously, it's a lot easier to get into bookstores and libraries and things like that when you are traditionally published. With self-publishing, the focus is generally online, like with Amazon, iTunes, Barnes & Noble, their website. As far as print books are concerned, traditional publishing definitely has the advantage over self-publishing. So next we have difficulty. Obviously, it's much harder to get traditionally published than it is to self-publish. Now, does this mean if you don't get your book traditionally published that it is bad? Not necessarily. This business is extremely subjective. It could be that your book is really good and there might be an audience for it, but an agent or a publisher doesn't really know how to market it. If it kind of mixes up different genres and there's not a clear-cut category, but then it also could be completely subjective. I mean, the agent or publisher could have been in a bad mood the day they tried to read it. You just don't know. It might be that they're already publishing a similar book. Ultimately, there's only so many books that traditional publishers are going to put out every year. And there's a lot more people writing books. So what ends up getting published depends a lot on people's personal preference, what they think is going to sell, what they can convince the company will sell, things like that. Now, just because self-publishing is really easy, it doesn't mean you should write a novel and publish it immediately. You want to go through the same revision process and editing and polishing as a traditionally published book would. But anyway, it definitely is easier to self-publish a book. The next thing to talk about is freedom. Now, with traditional publishing, you might have to compromise certain aspects of your story. You might have to make some revisions that you're not thrilled about. You don't really have a lot of control over your cover design, for example, or certain aspects of the marketing, whereas with self-publishing, you are your own boss and you are in control of everything, so you have ultimate freedom. The next category to talk about is reputation. Unfortunately, there is a huge stigma involved with self-publishing. Because there are so many writers that are self-publishing books that aren't ready to be published, or self-publishing just because they think they can make a ton of money, there are a lot of self-published books out there. So unfortunately, there is a certain notoriety that comes along with being traditionally published. It's easier to get reviews when you're traditionally published. I mean, even if you just look around YouTube, the kind of books that people are reviewing on here, you'll see that not many booktubers read and review independently published or self-published books. Now, there are a lot of self-published authors that overcome this, but it is something to be aware of. The next thing to talk about is money. Now, there are no advances in self-publishing, obviously, but while you do hear about some authors getting these outrageous, six-figure advances, that is not the typical experience. So you shouldn't expect that from a traditional publishing deal. If you publish with a smaller publisher, you might not even get an advance. If you publish with a smaller publisher, you might not even get an advance. But as far as the percentage of royalties, that is definitely a lot greater with self-publishing. So for every book that you sell, you're going to make a lot more money off of each individual one as a self-published author than you would as a traditional published author, because a percentage of those sales have to go to the publishing company, your agent, etc. So there are less people to pay in self-publishing, so you get more of a percentage of your royalties. The next thing to talk about is time frame. Now, traditional publishing can take a very, very long time. In both traditional and self-publishing, it takes the same amount of time to write and revise a book. But with traditional publishing, you have to get an agent, and it can take you a really long time to get a literary agent. It takes literary agents 4 to 6 weeks sometimes to even read your manuscript. And then when you finally do get an agent and your agent submits your manuscript to publishers, it can take sometimes up to 2 years for you to get a book deal. And then when you've gotten a book deal, it can take up to another 2 years to actually publish your book. These are all loose estimates, but obviously it's going to be a lot quicker to self-publish. And the last category is marketing. Now, whether you're traditionally published or self-published, these days publishers do expect you to do some marketing, but with a traditional publisher, you generally will have some help. Also, it can sometimes be easier to organize things like blog tours or events if you have the notoriety of being traditionally published. For self-publishing, you have to do a lot more work with marketing, and it can sometimes be harder to market your book because it is self-published and there's so much more competition. If you're traditionally published, you're also competing with all of the books out there, but you do have that little bit of notoriety that makes it a little bit easier. So there you have it. Those are the pros and cons of self-publishing versus traditional publishing. Obviously, there are benefits and drawbacks associated with either path. It's really an individual thing, and ultimately you have to do what is right for your book. Leave me a comment down below. I would love to hear your experience with this. Have you ever self-published? Have you been traditionally published? Are you working on the traditional publishing process right now, or the self-publishing process? Let me know in the comments down below. Next week I'm going to be giving you 3 tips on how to write a query letter. A query letter is an introduction to literary agents to get them to try to read your manuscript. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit about that. So make sure you stick around for that. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos about writing, books, or music. And don't forget to sign up for my mailing list, The Daily Writer, for daily writing prompts. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy writing!